Your typical pergola does not provide much shade, if any. You can transform it into a cozy retreat haven by adding a fabric wire-hung canopy. It keeps the sun from baking your family and friends, turning the outdoor living space under your pergola into a stylish, delightful oasis. The canopy is supported on your pergola via stainless steel wires. This tutorial shows how to sew and install a one-wide canopy system instead of multiple canopies.
Hi, Eric Grant here with Sayorite. In this tutorial video, we're going to show you how to make a wire-hung canopy. This is a one-wide canopy, not a multiple canopy. We also have a video showing how to make a multiple wire-hung canopy. But this one covers your entire space, and this one is set up with a water-resistant fabric. I believe this is satin fabric. We also carry other acrylic fabrics that are great as well. And we're going to show you how to install this on your pergola. The first thing we need to do is take measurements, and that's what we're going to show you how to do next.
Before showing measuring, let's have a little discussion about your pergola.
So one of the things you need to consider before you start making your wire-hung canopy and even consider putting a wire-hung canopy on your pergola is how is it going to be attached to the pergola and how's it going to run. Now I can't really attach it here. I could attach it here and it could open and close this direction. I'd have to attach to the house over here because there's no pergola over here. And this beam is a little bit lower. What I like to do is I like to install the tensioners for the cable in a beam that's highest. And usually the wire-hung canopies run with the beams along the top. As you can see, the beams are going this direction. So this is the most common way to install it. I have a high beam that I can install my fasteners in, and I have the canopy going along with the top beams, which is the way we're going to design it. So it'll open and close this direction, not that direction. The fabric calculator gives you a choice of building multiple wire-hung canopies or one wide canopy. It's really your choice. The one wide canopy is not nearly as popular as multiple canopies. For us, we're going to do both systems on this pergola just to show you how it can be done, and it'll help you make a decision of exactly the kind of system that you want.
This is an example of a multiple canopy selection. Each canopy is typically a max of about 52 inches with an approximate 3-inch gap between canopies. Here's an example of one wide canopy. The maximum width is no more than 186 inches. It does provide more shade since there are no gaps between canopies. It can be a little bit more difficult to sew together, but it may be easier to install on your pergola. All you need are 2 measurements for your pergola. Let's show you how to do it.
Okay, so the first thing for our measurement is we have to consider this part that comes out. We don't want the canopy to obviously run into that. So the canopy can go no further than this point, and I'd like to keep it at least an inch or so away from this. So my measurement point is we're going to measure where we want the canopy to actually begin for the width and end for the width. So that's our first measurement. On that side of the pergola there is a building, and we want it to go underneath that overhang by a few inches but not obstruct the light. So where Ross is holding the end of the tape measure is right where the canopy will end. And if we come over here, I'm at 106, and I'm just going to use some chalk here to mark it at 106. And that is definitely clears this obstacle here. So our width for our canopy is 106 inches. So we marked it there at the beginning and the end with chalk.
Next, we'll measure the length from beam to beam.
And so Ross has the tape measure up against his beam, and my beam measures at 160 inches right here. So that is our length measurement that we'll enter in the fabric calculator. Perfect.
We make calculating easy by using Sayorite's fabric calculator. Visit the Sayorite website and click on Learn, then click on Fabric Calculator. Scroll down and click Wire Hung Canopies. There are only 3 measurements you need to enter in the calculator and 3 options. You can always click the question mark if you have questions about the entry. Our width of our pergola was 106 inches, and the length from beam to beam was 160 inches. At the Sailrite website, we've chosen 100% acrylic fabric, a brand called Sattler, and it's 47 inches wide, so we'll enter that in the fabric calculator for fabric width. The options are shown in blue. First is the fabric type. If you select a mesh fabric like Fifertex Plus, Fifertex Stripes, or Textiline, you don't typically have to worry much about water drainage. But if you select a water-resistant fabric like the one we selected, Sattler 100% solution dyed acrylic, then you must provide a way for the water to escape, either with a grommet or by canting the canopy. For our system, we're going to slant the canopy so that water can drain off in lieu of using grommets. Here's a look ahead at our finished canopy. You can barely tell that it's 2 inches lower on our one end. This will allow the water to drain nicely. No matter what your selection is, the fabric calculator will determine exactly what you need to order. The next selection is the retraction extraction system. This means how does the canopy open and close? Let's demonstrate the 2 choices you have. The webbing strap system uses a length of webbing with D-rings on the end. A 1 wide canopy, which is not shown here, will have 2 webbing straps attached to the front of the canopy on each end. To secure the canopy closed or open, a fender hook is used, and then a boat hook or other tool is used to attach the D-ring to it. Now, the Pulley open-close system uses a line with pulleys to control up to 3 canopies at a time. The canopies are closed and opened with a control line running down the post of the pergola. The choice is yours. The next selection is whether you want multiple canopies or 1 wide canopy. We're going to make 1 wide canopy, so we're going to click on that. Once all those entries are made, you'll get details on the dimensions to build the canopies and a full materials list for your particular pergola. One of the nice things about the list of materials is that the part number shown in blue is a hyperlink. So you can click it and it'll go to the Sailrite website. You can enter the quantity of the items you need and do that for all the items to determine the price of your wire hung canopy system. We selected the Pulley open close system, and it has a materials list and quantities needed for that. If you've selected the webbing strap system, it'll have different materials and quantities. Scroll down a little further and you'll see a tools list that's not typically in the average person's toolbox. Then you'll see household tools. And finally, general sewing instructions, which will help with the sewing procedure. But the video overall is the best help of all. It's now time to cut our fabric to size and sew panels together for our 1 wide canopy.
For the 1 canopy that we're going to make multiple canopies, our fabric calculator for us says to cut 3 panels and sew them together, and each of those 3 panels should be cut to 184.26 inches. I'm just going to round it to 184. So how do you do that? So what I've done is I put my fabric on a table and I've taken a tape measure and put it on the edge of the table and marked it at 60 inches so that I could have my roll sit here. Then I don't have to work on the floor, and all I need to do is put the edge of my fabric up against the table, roll it out to 60 inches, and then I mark it gently at 60 inches with a pencil, and then I come down here, put this mark at the end of the table, and roll it out to the next 60 inches, and so forth until we get the length that we need to cut our fabric. I'm using a T-square to make sure that I get this edge to be straight. The other edge I wasn't concerned about because this is the edge I'm going to start with. And I am using a number 2 pencil. These are going to be cut lines, so I don't have to worry about the pencil. And I'll probably be using a number 2 pencil for the whole project for this Sattler marine grade fabric, or I think they call it Sattler awning grade. Now let's cut it with a hot knife. I'm using the Sailrite Edge hot knife, and this hot knife has a precision cutting foot and blade, so I don't have to worry about it damaging the table. It's an awesome foot. And do I need to cut this with a hot knife? This edge is going to be rolled under, so you're not really going to see this edge. You could cut this with scissors, but there are some edges that have to use a hot knife on a synthetic fabric like this that could unravel. Okay, we've got the first one cut. We're going to roll out the next one, cut it, and then roll out a third one, just as the fabric calculator says, 3 panels. Then we'll show you what's next. To sew panels together along the long sides, we're going to do an overlapping seam. But this is a striped fabric, and you can see there's a gray a stripe here and a gray stripe here. This is a full gray stripe. So measure it. It measures exactly 3 inches. And what you want is when you overlap it, you want this one to equal 3 inches. And that depends on where the stripe is. So I've cut up a little piece of scrap, and I'll put this on 3, right there. And then I lay this one so that it is at 0 inches, and I mark this, and that is my seam allowance for my overlapping seam. Okay, so that means that our seam allowance is 3/4 inches. I measure it here, and we have to be very accurate about this. There are fabric marking pencils, but I'm just going to use a number 2 pencil and do it very lightly. The reason I'm not using a fabric marking pencil is that they are typically leave a fairly big line, and I want to be very accurate with this. So there's my soft line, which probably won't show up. And we're going to do this all the way down this side, and we're also going to do it on that side because we have to join 3 panels together. I'm going to put the double-sided tape, this is an acrylic basting tape, in other words an acrylic glue, all the way down both long edges. And when I do this, you have to press it down, especially with a fabric that is an acrylic like this, because it's very stain and water resistant. And so pressing it down hard like this helps the glue to stick. So we're going to go down both long edges, kind of in the middle of our seam allowance area. Okay, so we only want to baste on one side at a time and then sew it, and then do the other side. So I'm going to peel off the transfer paper, and I've got my second panel laying right beside it. There is no right side or wrong side to this Sattler awning grade fabric, or marine grade. Sometimes that's what I like to call it. I'm going to butt up this end because these are the cut ends that are straight, so hopefully they're going to stay straight. And then I'm just going to baste it right on top of that line, being very careful to not stretch one panel more than the other, and to make sure that it's accurate. Once it's basted in place, I got to get my ruler, come over here, use the Serrat canvas patterning ruler, or a object that you can press down hard on the seam, and that'll keep it basted well. Now this is a factory edge. So a factory edge of Sattler or Sunbrella fabric is sealed by the manufacturer. So you don't have to worry about it unraveling. And we're going to do this all the way down the length of this panel. Once I get this side basted on, we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'll show you what's next. So you can see I can do this all on a small table. I just have to work in small increments at a time. So I move down here to where I have it basted. I peel off the transfer paper. I join the line carefully for about a foot or 2 into the table, like right there. Then I crease it well so it sticks. I put my device ahead of where I stopped. I move the fabric down to that location, and I repeat the steps. It's really not hard to do it on a tabletop like this. So I have to sew here. This is where I join the panels together. This has to go in the throat of the machine. I can't roll all of this unless I have a loft table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll a beginning section of the fabric up to probably the end of my table, and then clamp it in place, and then once we get to that point, we have to scroll it some more so we can get it underneath the throat of the sewing machine. So I'm using the center foot, the left side of the center foot, and coming along this seam, and my needle's in center position. No reason to do any reversing here. Whoops, I got to turn the machine on and unplug the light so that the cameraman's happy. And we'll just start sewing right here. 6mm straight stitch using polyester Tex 90 thread in a color that is similar to the fabric color, and you just want to sew as carefully as possible. And then when you when you stop and you have to position your fabric, bury your needle like we have so that you don't lose your position, and then just put your fabric through the machine, make sure it's not going to get caught on any edge, and continue to sew. So this is a little bit of a tedious process. That's why the one big canopy is a little bit more difficult than multiple canopies, but it can be done.
We're using the world-famous Ultrafeed LSZ sewing machine in an industrial tabletop. It is amazing how much fabric you can actually get under the arm of this sewing machine. It is a mechanical walking foot sewing machine. Portable, yet heavy duty.
Bury the needle, reposition.
Because we buried the needle in the fabric, we could reposition the fabric without losing our last spot.
I'm going to scroll up the fabric as I get to it. That's basically all you do. Just keep it going in there and guiding it. Not too bad. Notice that my hand is right here, and I'm lifting the fabric up so it doesn't get caught on the table, and it's actually going over my shoulder. This is one way you get large panels like this sewing. So as I was sewing, some of it became unbasted, but not a big deal. If that happens, don't pull your fabric out. Just basically baste up to where you can baste it on that line that you drew, and then just hold your finger here and sew up to that point. And then when you run into your finger, not through your finger, stop with the needle buried and baste it some more. Lay this flat and baste on your line. It's easy, so don't let that panic you. Remember, the double-sided tape doesn't stick permanently. It's meant to stay in there, but it doesn't stick permanently. So this seam is sewn with one stitch. I want to sew in a second stitch, but I like to sew it on the other side so I can actually see where the edge of the fabric is. So believe it or not, I'm going to flip the panel, and this side that was scrolled will be on the outside, which means I have to scroll it through on the other end. Don't worry about all this crazing and stuff like that. I mean, that is typical for an acrylic fabric. Crazing is natural anytime it gets a fold. So I'm going to flip this around, and then I'm going to scroll it through on this end. We still have the double-sided tape because we still have to put another panel over here. But this basically is just going to go through the throat of the sewing machine now. Same process. So I have my fabric in here, and I think I'm going to leave the needle in center position. That puts that stitch right about there, which is pretty close to the first stitch. But I'm going to try to stay a little bit on the inside of the left side of my center foot just to make the stitch a little bit further from the first stitch. And again, no reversing, and we're just going to sew down this side in the same manner. So one little trick that may be helpful, especially after you have the first stitch in place, because you don't have to worry about it coming unbasted, is when you come to your stop position with your needle buried, take your fabric and push it in the throat of the sewing machine like that to almost, in a way, advance it. Then smooth out your fabric like this and then sew. And do that all the way up to where your fingers are, and repeat that step again. So the fabric calculator says I need the assembly to be cut, that's after it's sewn together, to equal 107.5 for us. Okay, so you need to look at the calculator to determine what you need. But I already have two panels still sewn together that equal, when I measured them, about 94 inches, which means I only need a strip more that's about 14 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the last panel, not to 14 inches, I'm going to leave some extra in there, probably to 18 inches. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to show this, but I'm going to take that last panel, I'm going to cut it to 18 inches, and I'm going to sew the factory edge, or baste the factory edge, to this panel assembly. Then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'll only have 18 inches to contend with through the throat of the sewing machine, which makes my job as sewing much easier. That may not work out for you, but if it does, great. So here's my last panel, and if I use the clear acrylic ruler at 18 inches, which is right there, that puts my cut right about here. So I'm just going to use this stripe as my cut line, and I'm going to cut with scissors. This will be the edge that I don't use against the other panel. I'll use the factory edge.
After basting this strip on, we'll take it to the machine and sew it. Since we're using water-resistant fabric, we're going to hem the factory edge first.
Our 18-inch panel's been sewn on, and this is the side we cut with scissors. This is the unraveling you can expect out of an acrylic fabric. I'm not going to work with this side, and I'm not going to cut it to size yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the factory side, which is all the way on the third panel, right there. This is the factory edge, and right now we don't have a right side or a wrong side for this fabric. Most of them you won't have. We're going to hem this to 3/4 inch, which means at 1.5 inch we want to strike a line so that we can fold to that line. So we're going to be pretty accurate here. Technically you could use the stripes of this fabric to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and mark it lightly with my pencil all the way down. And let me show you what we're going to do after I get this second mark on here. So I'll put this one on. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to put double-sided tape all the way down this running side. We're not going to do this to the other side. We're going to put this about 1/4 inch away from the edge because we're going to, after we sew this hem in place, then we're going to concentrate on where we're going to cut the other end, because this is obviously too large. Okay, so I stopped here just to give you an example of what we're going to do, and I'm just want to use the canvas patterning ruler to adhere the double-sided tape well to the acrylic fabric. This is Sattler. We have many great acrylic brand fabrics, and we happen to be using Sattler here. Peel off the transfer paper, and we're going to fold to that line and create a single hem all the way down. This just gives it a finished look, and it also provides strength for the edge. And then we're going to crease it well with the Serrat canvas patterning ruler, and we're going to go all the way down this side.
We're on step 1 of the general sewing instructions. We're going to fold the edges to create a 3/4 inch hem.
Here's our hem, and I put the needle in the left position, and I'm going to use this foot here to get pretty close to that edge. And I did a little bit of reversing here at the beginning, not much. And we're going to sew down this seam. Everything's basted together, so it should be pretty easy. All right, and then we're going to take this back to the table, and I'll show you how we cut it to size for the next hem on the long side.
We're going to cut our fabric to the appropriate width plus hem allowance and hem the final edge. The cut width should be 107.5 inches before hemming. However, we hemmed one side already to 3/4 inch, so since our finished width needs to be 106 inches and we need to add a 3/4 inch hem to the last edge, we need the panel to measure 106.75 inches. Forgive us, the mic was left on the table, so I have no good audio. I line up the hem to the edge of the table because we're going to use the table to measure this out so we don't have to place it on the floor and use a long tape measure. And I go to my 60-inch mark that I used earlier when determining the length of our panels, mark the fabric, move the fabric down, and then measure to the desired cut size. This is just an easy way to measure fabric without having to get down on your knees, something I hate. Okay, so we move the fabric down, and I can take a tape measure now and measure from the mark that I made, and we can cut it to the exact width that we want. Our desired finished is 106, but we need to add a 3/4 inch hem, so it's 106 3/4. Using a straight edge or a T-square, we're going to strike a line at that location. Then we'll use a hot knife and we'll cut the fabric. It's very important to use a hot knife since we're using an acrylic fabric which will unravel if it's not cut with a hot knife because we're only doing a single hem. Okay, I just discovered that the mic was laying on the table. Now we have our audio back.
So the hem is facing up, away from the tabletop, which is what we want, which means that I'll be folding the hem on the same side over here. So all I have to do here is take the clear acrylic ruler, place it on 1.5, and I did take a grease pencil and I marked where 1.5 is on both ends, and that'll make it so much easier because I don't have to search for the 1.5 on the clear acrylic ruler, and those come off so easily. So it's right here. Now there's a whole bunch of lines there that are going to make it hard to see my pencil, and I'm probably just going to use the line as my guide, and I'm just going to fold right to that point. So basically 3 lines in for me. If you don't have a line, strike it lightly with a pencil. We're going to put basting tape on it, and then we're going to fold to the line, which creates our 3/4 inch hem on this side as well. And then we're going to sew it just like we did the other side. We're not going to show that.
It's now time to create the sleeves for the spline coating that'll slide into the awning track.
The hem is facing down because the hem will be facing the ground, and this will be facing up so water could shed off if it comes to the edge instead of hitting the hem. So this is the edge that should be straight, but after you sew things, often they are not straight anymore. So I'm going to take a T-square, I'm holding it upside down so I get the longer edge, and I'm going to line it up perfectly with this edge. I know this won't go across the entire panel because it's a big panel, but as you can see, it's slightly off. So I'm going to mark this with a pencil all the way to this point, and then I'm going to start from the other end. So I'm lined up here against this hemmed edge, and it obviously is running into the other line, which is good. Strike it here. Now, do I have to use a hot knife for this? No, because this is going to be a double fold. So what I'm going to do, because if you don't use a hot knife, it'll unravel, but since it's a double fold, who cares, because it's going to be inside of another hem. So I'm going to use scissors and cut right on my line to make sure this edge is perpendicular to the hemmed edge.
Back to the fabric calculator on the general sewing instructions. We're on step 2 now.
With the hem facing down, now we're going to take our clear acrylic ruler, now that this edge is perfectly straight, and we're going to strike a line. Doesn't matter how hard you strike, because of the fact that we are going to hem to that line and then hem again. And we're going to create a 1/2 inch hem. So let's just stop there for now. I'm going to put double-sided tape on this, and I will show you the process for this hem and the next in this short run, even though we do have to go down the entire length of the panel. So let's stop there. Let's use our canvas patterning ruler. Okay, so this peels up, revealing the glue, and then you fold to that line, and once it's creased with your fingers, go over it with the patterning ruler to stick it down well. Make sure you press hard. Then what I'll be doing is I'll be measuring from this fold 2 inches to create a 1 inch hem. So I'm only going to mark it here, and we'll take our double-sided tape. I'm going to rip this. This would be the second step. I'm just showing you in advance so that we can get this out of the way and I can do it. Take that, put it on, that over top of that 1/2 inch hem, peel this off, and then this gets folded right to that line. And then we crease it well with the Serite canvas patterning ruler. So we're going to do this all the way down this. First we're going to do the 1/2 inch hem, then we're going to come back and do this hem. So there is our double hem, which forms the pocket for our cording. We're going to put the magnetic guide at 3/4 inch, and our needle is at center position here. So I'm going to butt the fabric up against that edge, and we are going to make sure that we do some reversing here, because this could come under some stress. So I'm going to do it a couple times. That's good. And then we're going to go straight along this edge, just guiding it in as we go. 3/4 inch from that fold. Pretty easy.
We do not want to put the double hem on the opposite end yet, because we have to measure for our sleeves next. So don't think you can just move and do the next raw edge. You cannot.
Okay, the Serite fabric calculator for our pergola says that each span will be 29.21 inches, and we have 6 spans for the length of our 1 wide canopy. So what I typically do is I use a yardstick or a nice measuring piece of equipment, and I mark it at 29.21, which is a little bit less than 1/4. I mark it on both sides with a marker. That way I can easily reference it. Now it's extremely important to have the hem on the long edge facing down, as you can see here. This will be facing up, the hem that we just sewed in for the sleeve. So make sure you do that before you take these measurements.
In the general sewing instructions, we're on step 3 and 4.
from fold to fold, this is the fold at the end, which is where we're going to start, where we created this. We're going to come over here and we're going to mark it right at 0, which is right there on the ruler, okay? And then since this is a long panel, I'm going to come over here, and from that same location, I'm going to mark it here so that I can strike a line that is perfectly straight with that edge that we just made. So light line here. This doesn't have to be light because it's actually going to be hidden in the awning track. Let's do it over here. Put a mark here. Now I'm going to take a straight edge, and I have a long straight edge, which is very nice. And I'm going to go from mark to mark and strike a line and making sure that I'm right on those marks, as you can see that I am. So we're going to do this, and then I'll move the fabric down the table, and we will strike this line all the way down the, what is this, the width. So to do this on a table, you just simply do this so that you can easily measure and mark the remainder of the panel. Nice. All right, this is the part where you really need a second helper, because you're going to grab it where the line is with your thumb. Bill and I are doing this, and then we want to fold that portion under. And then what I'm going to do is Bill's going to put it on that line. Yeah, there you go. Perfect, like that. And now what I can do is I can work on the end and crease it right on that line, going all the way down. Now, see how this is off right here? This will eventually be perfectly in line with that. So if I do it like that, then I know it should be perpendicular to this edge. So I'm going to crease it here, and I'm going to take a stapler, and I'm going to staple this in place. And if I keep my staple close to the fold, I'll never see those holes because the cording is going to go in here, and the awning track will slide into that. So then we're just going to go down the edge. See, I'm right on my pencil mark, and I'm going to hold it with my fingers, and I'm going to put another staple close to that edge, about a ½ inch or so, it doesn't matter. And we're going to do staples about every probably 8 to 6 inches, probably more like 8, down the entire length of this. And when we get to the other end where Bill is, we will move the fabric. But before I move the fabric, this is important. With an acrylic fabric like Sattler or other brands like Sunbrella, you can crease it nicely with this tool, and it'll have a memory. That's not really the case with mesh materials as much, vinyl meshes, but with this one, beautiful like that. Okay. So we can only make one of these folds at a time, and then we have to sew it. So I'm going to move it to the machine. I have the magnetic guide at 3/4 again, and the needle's at center position, so we're going to fold 3/4 of an inch from that fold that we just created, and we're going to do a heavy reversing at the beginning and the end of our sewing, just because I don't want that to come undone, okay? And then all I'm going to do is just guide it up here. Since we have very little fabric in the throat of the machine, it's pretty easy. Oops, got caught on the table. Okay, we're just going to sew down this entire edge, and then I'll go back to the table and we'll show you how we can put the next fold in place for our next span. We have 6 spans, which means there's going to be 7 sleeves. For however many spans you have, you'll have 1 extra. We're going to go ahead and pull out the staples that we inserted, and you can just do it with a screwdriver. As you can see, it's really easy. Now you notice that this hem is facing up because we folded it under, but this hem is facing down. That's the way it should be. So this is exactly where you want it positioned next. And then you want to take this, and hopefully if you've done it right, this fold is right where this fold is, and it is. You can see it's right where my mark is. So now what I'm going to do is, again, mark it and strike lines at this position. From this fold to this new fold. We're going to strike a line all the way across, just like we did before. Okay, I have the cameraman right now, and so what we're going to do is we're going to grab it again with our thumbs this way, and this is the one that we just sewed. We're going to tuck it under. So throw it underneath, straighten it out as best you can. The straighter it is, the easier it is to work with. There we go, that's better. Okay, so now there's the fold. So I can do this without a second helper now. So basically we're just repeating the steps again. We're folding right on that line that we created, and then we'll staple every 8 or so inches apart from staple at about a ½ inch from the line, and we'll crease it well. And then we're going to sew it in the same manner. So that's the process. We'll do this all the way down the length until we get our 6 spans and 7 sleeves. Now when we reach the other end, we're going to have to cut it to size, and I will show you what we do once I get all of these sleeves in and reach the final sleeve, which will show you how to cut it and do that one.
We're now on step 5, which is to measure the final span and add 1½ inches. We'll show you how to do that now.
The sleeve is facing up, and this is our last sleeve before the end here. So the process here is to measure up, but you need to add. So fold this sleeve back so you go from fold to fold and lay it nice and flat with it on 0. And then mark here, but where we marked for all the other ones, but we're going to add 1½ inches. So let's just put it on 21. That would be 22½, okay? So this will be our cut line. So let's do that at the next juncture and the next juncture. We're not going to strike a line here, but the point that's 1½ inches away from where the fold will be here. The hem should be down as it is here, and we're not going to use a hot knife for this because it's going to have a double fold just like it did on the other end, so I'm just going to cut it with scissors right on that line that I struck. Okay, now that it's cut, we're going to do the same thing we did with the last end, which is mark it at 1 inch. We'll put double-sided tape here. So I put a little sample piece of double-sided tape on just to show you again. Probably don't need to see this, but maybe you forgot because it's been a week since you've come back to your job. So now we measure over 2 inches from that fold and mark it, put double-sided tape here, and then we fold to that mark. And then we're going to take it to the machine and we'll sew 3/4 inch from this fold, which will put our stitch right about there.
In this chapter, we'll show you how to cut the awning track to size and join a section to it to make the width that we need.
The fabric calculator will tell you how many pieces of awning track to get. This is a heavy-duty 180-degree awning track.
Here's the information about the awning track on the Sarat fabric calculator. You can see we need to order 7 pieces of a 93-inch track and 3 pieces of a 40-inch track. And we're also going to need to join the track together with a track extension bar. We need 2 of those. Our final track width after it's been joined together and cut to size will be 106 inches.
I have a 93-inch piece and I have a 40-inch piece. But you need to confirm the measurements before you cut. So I'm going to measure to make sure this is 93 inches. Yes, it's 93 inches. So to make my 106, which is my width, means that I need to measure 13 inches of this piece, and I've already marked it with a marker there. So we need to cut this one, and we can use the other portion for other pieces of track because I have 7 tracks for my application. So I'm going to take this and put it on the edge of a table, and then I'm going to use either a vise or a clamp and clamp it to the tabletop so that I don't have to hold the track on securely. And you can cut this track with a hacksaw. There are other ways you could cut the track too, but a hacksaw works pretty well here. And this is a hacksaw with a lot of teeth. There we go. I recommend that you take a file and file any burrs off of it because you don't just want sharp pieces and you want the ends to be totally flat. So take some time, make sure that it doesn't have burrs on it. So you need to determine if you want all your joints to be on the same side, and I'm going to do that. They can be on the opposite ends, but if they're on the same side, then just always work with the track with its up or facing you, whichever. Okay, so we need to butt it up like this. I like to take a drill bit that's 13/32 and actually insert it in the track. It fits, it's a little bit loose, but it will help to keep everything together. And put it in this track and push it together, and that'll help keep it aligned a little bit. And then this is a U-channel, it's aluminum. It's used to secure the joint, and it's 40, what is it, 40, it's 4 feet long. And I like to cut sections 8 inches long out of it. I've already cut some with a hacksaw here, and all I'm gonna do is just make sure that the edges are smooth and there are no burrs with the file. If anything, the back side has to be completely burless so that it can sit flat up against the flange of the awning track. So that's the most important burrs to get off of this. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to go in the middle of the joint, so that leaves about 4 inches on each side, and we're going to rivet it. But before we do that, I'm going to actually put the double-sided tape on that we used for the actual project, and this just helps to secure it in place. And peel off the transfer paper. It sticks like gangbusters to this. So this is a temporary hold. Okay, with the track butted up to itself and no burrs or debris in the way, I'm going to set it close to the round portion, but not so to the point where it can't sit flat. And I'm just going to estimate where the center is. That looks pretty good to me. Push down hard and then check the side profile here to make sure that it's flat. And if it isn't, move it away from the track and it'll sit flatter. But I want it close to there, just not so it's not flat. Okay, so now I'm going to use a measuring device, and I'm going to mark for the rivets. And from the joint, I want to rivet at approximately 1 inch from there. Oops, is my marker going to work? Yeah. And then from the end, I want to rivet at 1 inch from the end. And I want to do that on this side as well. 1 inch from the joint, 1 inch from the end, and it doesn't have to be exact. Okay, so now we use an 1/8 inch drill bit, and we have a substrate on the bottom that we can drill through, which is really important to keep it from burring when the drill bit comes out the other side. So I don't mind ruining this. 1/8 inch drill bit. Okay, once I've gone through and hit the wood, I'll stop and take it out. Then I'm going to drill the next one on the next side, because that basically kind of locks it in place. And then this hole and the other one as well. Okay, so the holes are drilled, and we have that drill bit in there. You can kind of just walk the drill bit out with a tool like this. This works pretty well all the way to the end. And reuse that again. Now we need to set our rivets, and this extension track that you buy from Sayrite has the included rivets. So we put a rivet in the riveting tool. To prepare it, the riveting tool, you can just use a standard riveting tool. I like to place it over the edge of a table and flip it to the back side, because I want the rivet head to be on the back side. So I'm going to hold the extension track on the bottom side with my fingers, and I'm going to push the rivet through, and I'm going to make sure that the tool is flat as I press the trigger until the mandrel breaks. Okay, now I noticed that the track came apart. No big deal, because when we drilled it, it was together. So the next one I'm going to do is on the opposite side. Doesn't matter which hole, but I just got to hold it in place and push it through. And do this again, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other 2 holes, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. Here it is with all the rivets installed on the front side, and here they are on the back side. That's what it should look like.
Now we'll install the snap clips to the awning track.
Next we'll be installing the snap clip, and it has some bolts and some spacers, and obviously a 9-lock nut. The range for a snap clip on the left side and the right side is anywhere between 6 inches to 16 inches, and we don't want it to land on top of our joint here. 8 is optimal. I try to always go with 8 if I can, and so we definitely can because that falls well within that range. So I'm going to go to the other end. At the other end, I want it to be whatever that measurement is on that other side. For us, 8 inches. So you may be asking, how many cables do I have for my one wide canopy? And the calculator actually tells you without telling you. If you look at the calculator and if you look at the cable tensioner for wood, it's a 2-pack, it says there are 3 of them, which means I have 3 cable runs. Or if you look at the wire rope stop clamp, it has 3, which means I have 3 runs of cable. So now that we know how many cable runs there are for your particular application, for us is 3, we're going to measure to our first mark, 8, multiply it times 2, which is 16, and then we're going to take that and 106 is our width for us, minus 16, and that's 90, and I only have 1 cable left, so I just need to basically divide that by 2, and I get 45 inches, and that's 45 inches from whichever mark you have. So that means we place the cable in the center at 45 inches right here. So I have marked the track already there. So our system has 3 cable runs, 2 on the ends and 1 exactly in the center. But if you had 4, you just take the measurement from mark to mark and divide it by 3. If you had 5, you take the measurement from mark to mark and divide it by 4. And then you mark those locations and you know exactly where your cables run. So here's our mark, 8 inches from the end for us, and I placed this at 3/4 of an inch because we want that hole to be 3/4 of an inch down from the upper portion of the flange. So I'm going to mark an X there, and I'll do that for every location where we have a snap clip. So now I'm going to use a 1/4 inch drill bit for the snap clips. And you notice that I have the sacrificial here that I'm drilling into, and I have the same height over here so that it's nice and flat, which helps in this process. You can actually pre-punch a hole here with a punch if you'd like, but if you hold the drill bit down hard and go like that, it won't wander on you because it's aluminum. There we go. So now the center hole, and then we'll do the exact same thing to the hole on the opposite end. Having it on a base like that means there are no burrs or very few burrs on the back side. So nice. The snap clip assembly is a 2-pack, and this is one and this is another. So we're going to grab our bolt first and the spacer that is not as high, the low one, or the thin one I should say. We're going to put it on our bolt, and then we're going to run our bolt through the back side so that the bolt comes up on the side that is curved. We'll put our thicker spacer here. This separates the stainless steel from the aluminum. I like to position my snap hook towards the center. That's not a rule, that's just a preference for me. And then I'm going to thread this on, and it has a nylock nut, and so you won't be able to do it by hand when it hits the nylock, and just leave it loose for now. And then we're going to go to each one of these holes, and we're going to follow that same procedure yet again. So on the front side, I'm going to use a Phillips because that's what this nut is, or bolt I should say. And over here I'm going to use an 11mm socket, and it doesn't matter where the snap rests. I'm going to tighten it down, and then I'm going to look to see if the bolt is almost flush with the nylock portion of this, and it is. This should be fairly tight, but it doesn't have to be exceptionally tight. And in fact, you don't want it to be too tight. I can go a little bit more with it. There we go. Now see how that's flush with the nylock washer? We're going to do that for every whole location. Once we have one track assembly complete, we're going to use it as a reference for all the other ones, which puts the joint on the same side, which is what I like, though it's not a big deal if it doesn't go on the same side. So here we go again. I'm not going to show any more of this.
In this chapter, we're going to discuss the retraction extraction system choices that you have.
You have 2 choices for an open close system. One is the Pulley open close system, which uses ropes and pulleys, and the second one is a webbing strap system. Let's show you a little bit about how they work, and then you can select the one that you want to use.
The webbing strap system uses a length of webbing with D-rings on the end. When making a one wide canopy, you'll have two straps on one side of the canopy to open and close it. To secure the canopy closed or open, a fender hook is used, and then a boat hook or other tool is used to attach the D-ring to it. Now, the Pulley open-close system uses a line with pulleys to control up to 3 canopies at a time. The canopies are closed and opened with a control line running down the post of the pergola. The choice is yours.
This is the hardware. You'd have to make the strap for the webbing strap system, and this is some of the hardware for the pulleys and rope system. Okay, so we're going to take the length of our track. For ours is 106. We're going to divide it by 2, and we're going to come up with a measurement of 53. We need to put in 2 locations for either the rope or the webbing strap systems, and one needs to be a little bit on this side, and one obviously needs to be on this side. So since my measurement was 53, I don't want any of them closer than that measurement we come up with.
Take the length of your track and divide it by 2. The result is the minimal distance from either the rope pulley or the webbing strap locations. For us, that amount is no less than 53 inches, and that must be centered on the track, and no closer than 3 inches from the snap clips.
Half of 53 is 26.5, and this is the center for ours, and you want to find the center and put that on the center mark. And we're going to put our rope closure system somewhere within this range, no closer than this measurement. It can be here, or it can be all the way 3 inches next to this snap if clip. So you can position it from here all the way to 3 inches from here, but obviously we don't want to put it in any of the junction things. We want this hole to be 3/4 of an inch down from the top edge, or approximately. So X marks the spot, and we'll do the same thing over here. Now, since we're doing the pulley open rope close system, I'm going to use a 3/8 inch drill bit, and I'm going to drill all the way through the track here. But if you're using the webbing strap system, I'll show you what you do instead.
At our marked locations for the pulley open close system, drill a single 3/8 inch hole at each mark.
Okay, so that hole is drilled. Obviously use a sacrificial table on the bottom side. So that's going to be where our line comes through. But if you're using the webbing strap system, you'll be instead installing a strap eye, not on this side, but on the other side, right at that position as well. So what I'd do is I'd mark it here with the track laying like it is, even though this doesn't go on this side. I'd mark it here, and I'd mark it here, and I'd use an 1/8 inch drill bit and drill through it. Then I use pop rivets, and this goes on the back side through those holes that we would have drilled. And obviously your webbing strap goes through like this, and you bunch it up before you put the what do you call them, pop rivets in, and that's your webbing strap system. But we're not doing that.
If you're using the webbing strap system, use an 1/8 inch drill bit and drill 2 holes for the strap eye.
And again, I'm using a sacrificial surface on the bottom.
If you selected the webbing strap system, this chapter will show you how to make the strap.
So now we're going to show you how to make the webbing strap. It's an optional choice if you don't use the rope pulley system. Now, when we show you the webbing strap on the actual pergola that we're using as an example, you'll notice that the webbing strap is too long. Well, we corrected all that. So what you see now about the measurements for the webbing strap will actually fit much better than what you see in the video when we demonstrate it.
If you selected the webbing strap system in the fabric calculator and you scroll down, you'll see a list of materials for the webbing strap system in lieu of the pulley open close system.
So we have a polyester 1-inch webbing, and it's black. Then what we want to do is we want to take the span measurement. Ours is 29.21, so right about there, and then we need to add 5 inches to that. So let's just go 29. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to cut it to 34 inches for us. Yours will be different depending on the span that you have. We're going to cut it with a hot knife. So on one end of the webbing, run a D-ring. This is the number 0 D-ring, 1 inch. and make a loop that's approximately 1 inch. Doesn't have to be exact. That looks good like that. Take it to the machine. So I'm using some black thread that I had laying around. That way it just looks better. And I'm doing it with a zigzag stitch, and I'm going to sew forward and back several times to secure it well. You can do it with a straight stitch as well. Now, just to keep this bottom leg from popping up, I'm going to sew with another stitch right here at the end. We have this sewn on now with 2 zigzag stitches reversing several times. So I'm going to take the end of this and I'm going to fold this back to 2 inches from the edge of the webbing. So from here to here. And it doesn't have to be exact, it just has to be close. If you went to the edge of the D-ring, it'd be almost 3 inches, which looks like right about there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the machine and I'm going to sew it right along here, creating an eye here. So this will basically be loose. So take it to the machine. We want it a little bit less, like 3/4 of an inch of an eye. So I'm going to sew it right about here. Again, you don't have to be exactly accurate with this. And this is just going to be 1 zigzag stitch. So going back and forth, just 1 stitch to form that loop, but make sure you do it heavily because it is going to come under some stress. And that should be sufficient. So here's what you should get. This goes like that, and this forms the eye, and you are done with this end. Now on the opposite end of the webbing, we're going to put a D-ring in. We're going to fold it over to approximately 1 inch. Doesn't matter which way it folds. And we're going to sew 2 zigzag stitches yet again. So we're going to put the strap eye on over here, and I'm going to put this webbing loop on. So this is the forward facing piece, and I really want the short edge to be on top here, and the longer edge will be underneath. So I'm going to run the strap eye through this eye that we made, and it will have to compress a little bit to get in there. And then I'm going to take my pop rivet, which I've already got loaded in the riveting gun, and we're going to go through this hole. Oops, was that not? Yeah, there we go. I was wondering if that was an 1/8 inch drill, but it looks like it's working. Then I'm going to put that one in, make sure the webbing's still on there. We're going to go to this one, making sure that we're not pinching the webbing underneath that portion, and we're not now. Load my next rivet in my riveting tool and go through this one as well. Now we have the webbing strap system secured through that hole. And there we go.
And now in this chapter, we're going to show you how to slide the awning track onto your Canopies sleeves.
We have to get 1/4 inch awning spline cording through each one of the sleeves. The 2 end sleeves are the hardest because they have a double hem. You can actually use the wire, the 1x19 wire that you purchased for it, to run it through, and you don't need a special cable runner like an electrician uses. Now, if this were a short run, like a multiple canopy, you wouldn't need this at all because you could just shove the cable through. But since it's a 1 canopy and it's over 100 inches long, this can help because we can use this to feed it through. Now, when you run upon a seam like I am here, you have to kind of open it up like that, and then you can get the cable through that. So push it all the way through until you come out the other end. There, I'm around another seam. So once we have it through, we can't really put it on top of each other like this side by side. It just there's not enough space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some strong tape. This is a strapping tape, and I'm actually going to wrap it up about what is that, 3 inches from the end of the cable, and just wrap so that it has a good strong bite all around the cable. Okay, and then when I get to the end, I'm going to put this here and butt it up to the end. I don't know, like that. And then we're going to wrap around it by about 3 inches. It'd be helpful if I had another pair of hands, which I do not. I'm not doing as clean a job as I want because I have to hold this there now. Now I can pretty much do it more efficiently. So I'm going to wrap around this about 3 inches. And then I'm going to make sure that this is tightly secured. Okay, make sure that it's biting down well, and it is. And really you should have a second helper so that they can hold the entire canopy in a line, but I'm going to shove it through this end that has the awning spline cord, and then I'm going to go to the other end and we're going to hold the canopy straight in a straight line so we don't have a bended portion. Cameraman's going to hold it over there, and now I can pull it through relatively easily. If it comes untaped, you just have to do it again. We're almost there. Now the other runs are much easier than this one. This is the toughest one and the other end because of the double hem. So there we are, we have the awning spline cord all the way through. Now we're going to cut the awning spline cording so that it's flush with the end, and we'll do the same thing, making sure that there are no wrinkles in our fabric on this end. It's almost flush, that's good enough. For the ones that aren't on the ends, you may not need the wire cable, depending on the width. If it's super wide, you may need the cable, but you might be able to feed this through without it. I'm going to try. We're going to start with the one that has either the strap eye or the push-in grommets for the open rope close system, and we're going to put it on the end. And I like to put this flat side out away and have this side going towards the canopy. Now, it would be helpful to have a second helper for this, but I think I can do it. The ones on the ends are always going to be more difficult than the ones in the middle because of the double hem and the hem on the edges as well. So take your time here, and if there are any burrs, make sure you get them knocked off. Got that on, and then we carefully push when you run into a seam. Make sure that it doesn't catch the seam. This is where that second person can be more helpful. See how it's catching? Got to make sure that it doesn't catch the good. And get past that, good. And we're going to go push it all the way to the other end. So now we're going to put in each successive one, and we're going to make sure that the flat side is the same as the flat side over here. So this is the one that's going to go on next. I don't think you need to see this again. I'm going to grab my cameraman as a second helper. Okay, we're going to use a number 8 by 1/2 inch hex head stainless steel screw, and we're going to drill it into the channel right where the hem is to keep this from possibly migrating out of the channel. And we're only going to do it on one end. That's all it takes. So I'm going to use an 1/8 inch drill bit, and I'm going to drill within that 3/4 inch hem area, and it's only going to go through one side. Okay, so stop before you drill through the other side of the channel. Then we're going to drive this screw in. The idea here is that this keeps it from migrating out, and it also gives you the opportunity, if you wanted to replace the fabric, you could unscrew it and just simply pull it out from the other end. That's why we put it at the end, because we can pull it out without having to go through all this area that's got a hole. So right like that, and we're going to do that on every one of these. So here and the next one, just on one end only. That secures it in place.
With one wide canopy, you can cant the canopy, or you can install grommets if you're using a water-resistant fabric.
If you're building a canopy that is using water-resistant fabric like Sattler or Sunbrella, you need to consider drainage because it will capture water and cause you problems. If you're building a one wide canopy, you have two choices. You either cant the fabric down 2 inches on one side for drainage, or you put grommets in it. For our one wide canopy that we are constructing, we're going to cant the material down so that water can drain off. If you're using a water-resistant fabric like Sattler or Sunbrella, and you could not cant the fabric downward, then you must put in the grommets, and we'll demonstrate how to do that on some scrap fabric. But if you're using a mesh fabric like Tex Plus or Textiline, where water can eventually drain through it, you don't have to worry about canting the fabric or installing the grommets.
Here are the calculations for grommet placements if you're using a water-resistant fabric and you can't cant the canopy downward so water can drain off. Use a calculator and enter the width of your canopy, then divide it by the appropriate amount.
Again, I'm going to take the track length, which for us is 106, and I'm going to divide it by 4 so that I can put 3 grommets in a canopy like this for water drainage. So at every 26.5 inches, I have my fabric on the table, one span, and I'm going to measure from track to track, and I get 28 inches. Half of that is 14 inches. So I'm going to mark this at 14 inches with a chalk pencil. That way I don't have a mark that doesn't come off. Every 26.5 inches, I'm going to put a grommet. This doesn't have to be exact, but I'm going to make it exact. So 26.5 would go right here, and there is our mark. And then what I would do is I'd measure, X marks the spot. I'd measure 26.5, I'd find the center again, and I'd mark it here, and I'd mark it over there. Now, we're not going to put grommets in this system because we're going to actually have this system at a cant. It's going to be tilted down. It's going to be 2 inches lower on one edge, which will hopefully have the water drain off, because this is a fabric that is water resistant. It'll pool up and cause problems if water can't get out of it. So either you put it at a cant, 2 inches down is what's recommended from the opposite end, or you put in these grommets. Now we're going to put grommets in some scrap fabric just to show you how it's done, but you basically know where the grommets need to go for each span so that water can drain out. This is some scrap fabric, and this is a number 1 plain washer grommet kit, and it includes a die set and a hole cutter and a little cutting pad. So I'm going to do this on some scrap just to show you how it's done at that position that we marked. I'm going to put the cutting pad underneath, which is a block of wood, and we're going to put it there. This is the cutter. We just hold it on the spot where we want to punch a hole. There's no need, well, let me pound this first. There is no need to reinforce the fabric at that location because it's not going to come under any stress. So we're going to put the male portion in the hole that we just created, like that, and we're going to put the anvil part down here, put it on there, and we're going to put the washer on top, and it has a concave side. You can see it here, that goes down. The convex side goes up, and then we're going to put this on. You do have to give it a few blows to set the grommet. Roll it to get it out because sometimes it sticks. You just want it to be installed so that everything's flat. For better water flow, this has a ridge, so this should be the underside if possible, and this should be the side facing the sun because there's less of a ridge, but it's not a big deal if you get it reversed.
Now, this is an optional step. You can make a control tape that'll help control swag. This is a top view of a canopy without a control tape. There's no webbing on the snap clips. Adding a control tape can help control the swag of each span. It is an optional step. Here the canopies do not use a control tape, and they still look good. But here the control tape is used. You can see it along the top. And you can see the spans are more consistent from beginning to end. So the choice is yours. You can use it or not.
Okay, this is an optional step. It's what we call the control tape, which is basically a webbing that goes from snap clip to snap clip. And what it does is it controls the swag, in other words, the built-in curve of each of the panel spans. So if you choose not to use it, what you'll find is at the end of your canopy you'll have more, in other words the one that's up against the fixed area, it'll have more of a swag, and the one at the other end will be less of a swag. If you use the control tape, which is webbing, which we're going to show next, that can help control that so that the swag between every single span is more consistent. The choice is yours. Let's show you how to make one if you want to do it. So use a calculator and put in the length from beam to beam. Ours is 160. Always subtract 3 inches. This is for the gap at the ends, and that comes up with your total. So your length minus 3, and then you divide it by the number of spans. So divide it, for us we have 6 spans. So we need to put a slit every 26.16 inches, and that's what we're going to do next. I've loosened the screw on the Serrite Edge hot knife, and we're using the precision blade, cutting foot and blade, and I'm going to take off the foot so that I have a nice sharp edge with the hot knife. And so here's 26 on my tempered cutting glass, and this is a little bit less than a quarter. It's about the half. So I'm going to put a line with a marker here because this will come up easily on my glass after I'm done. And the first, let me put my webbing over here. The first slit, you want to do it an inch. So here it's on 0, and I'm going to use this blade, and I'm going to heat up the hot knife that way it doesn't unravel, and I'm going to put it an inch from the end. So just like that. And I need to make 7 slits. So I'm going to put this on 0. Then I'm going to come down to my measurement over here, and I'm going to put it right there. And I'm going to go back and forth just a little bit, right in the middle of the webbing, going this direction. And then we move this to 0, right there, 0 inches. And we repeat the steps until we have 7 slits, since we have 6 spans. So however many spans you have plus 1. So we are going to put holes in this 7 times because we have 7 tracks. So, and that way we don't have to measure the whole length of the webbing. When we get to the last one, we'll just make sure we have an extra inch hanging over the edge.
One wide canopy only requires 2 on the extreme ends of the snap clips.
So here's how this is going to work. So we're going to open up the snap, we're going to put this on, and then it's going to flip around like that, and it's going to rest here. This will make the swag even when the canopy is fully closed. Okay.
In this chapter, we'll determine the cable textures are to be installed and how to install it.
Okay, so we just installed a multi-wire hung canopy, and now we're going to install one wide wire hung canopy. So you're going to see on the beam up here that there are already tensioners installed, and those are level. Usually with the multi-canopy, those are all level. With the one wide canopy, we like to get it at a cant so water can drain off. So we like it to be 2 inches down on one side. I'm going to use this cable that we already have installed for the multi-canopy and snap it to it. We're going to go over how to install cables later on. And what we want, if you don't use grommets, we want it to come down 2 inches on this side so that water drains off of it. If you don't want to cant the canopy for one wide canopy, you can install grommets in each of the spans. And we have a chapter on how to do that. But if you can, try to have it come down 2 inches on the opposite end, which is we're going to do over here. So this is the one on the end, and this is where they are level, and we mounted those at 4.5 inches, and we want this to cant down to 2 inches below that approximately. So I'm just going to take my chalk and I'm going to put it in the center here, and I'm going to mark right there would be about 2 inches. So you wouldn't have these in, obviously. You aren't going to be installing 2. So basically there's where our tensioner needs to be installed, but we need to put it right where the hook is. So I'm going to mark it right where this snap clip is with an X, marks the spot. Okay, so now I'm going to hold that here, and I'm going to mark the center one as well. So right here, and that would be the top. So I'm going to put an X here. While we're up here, so like that, while we're up here, we're going to also take a look at where our rope system goes. This is the track that has the pulley open close system, and I'm just going to mark where the track hangs at that position, and I'm going to put a line above it with my chalk so I know where that is. And we're also going to do the same thing. So we're using the track on the opposite end. This is the end that does not have the control line, and I'm just going to mark it. This is 2 inches down from our other one, or if I measured from here, this would obviously be 2 inches less than the opposite first edge so that water can drain off. So right there, and we mark this one right there, and then we also want to mark where the control line is, the track and the line with a T. And we'll do the same thing with that control line over there that already has a block from our last canopy. These are the cable tensioners that we're going to be installing in our pergola. If you're using softwood, you may want to try a 1/2 inch bit. If you're using hardwoods, 9/16 inch. You don't have to use a spade bit like this, but this brand makes a really good spade bit. We're going to do a 1/2 inch because I believe this is cedar. If it doesn't thread well, we'll move up to the 9/16. We want to tape the depth that I want to drill, and I want to drill so I have a little bit of space back behind the cable tensioner. And obviously I don't need a drill past the flange. So I'm going to put a piece of tape on my bit indicating where I want to stop drilling. Electrical tape works great for this. This is a white electrical tape. There we go. So I'm going to try to drill as level as I can right at our spot and stop at the tape. Went a little bit deeper than I wanted to. There we go. This cable driver can go into a regular chuck. I'm using an impact wrench, and so I'm using an 11mm socket. It's not magnetic, so it can fall out, but this is how we're going to drive the cable tensioner into our structure. So the end of this goes through like such, and we can drive it in, and let's see if our hole's big enough. Now when I get closer to the flange, I'm probably going to use a wrench. And the reason being is that I want this bottom hole to be vertical, up and down, and a little bit hard to do with a mechanical tool. I'm going to use my wrench now. Okay, so now I'm going to use my wrench, and I'm going to put that so that it's vertical a little bit more. And the flange is up against our structure. One more twist. There we go. Good. So this is the driver in a standard drill. It doesn't work as well as an impact wrench, but it does work if you don't have an impact wrench. See, it just doesn't have the power, so we're going to have to use a wrench the rest of the way.
One cable tensioner for each end of each wire run. Let's move on.
That's why I recommend an impact wrench, because a little bit more laborious.
In this chapter, we're going to show you how to cut the wire rope to size, and we're going to tension it in our cable tensioners.
When you undo cable wire, stainless steel wire, make sure that you're being careful that it doesn't all uncoil on you once you take off the plastic wrap, because it can just kind of blow up and uncoil. So I'm going to hold my hand here to prevent that from happening. And there we go. Now, if you take the cable wire, we'll take that off at the end, and if you just start taking it off the top, it'll kink it. But if you take it off like this by having the roll on the ground flat. Then you will have no kinks in your stainless steel 1x19 wire. Onto the end, I'm going to put a key first, and then I'm going to put a oval sleeve to lock it in place. And since this was cut, you may have to rotate this around to get it on the end. Once it gets on the cut end, it'll slide smoothly. Let me show you how. Rotate, rotate, rotate until it's on. Push it back, let it fall, and then take the sleeve and do the same thing. This is the first end. And we're going to just basically put it like a 1/4 inch or so from the end. So now I'm going to use the crimper, and these are set on 8. You can see the 8 here and the 8 here, and these roll around for different crimping abilities. We want them both on 8. Open it up, and we're going to crimp this twice. And we're going to do it close to the one end. Make sure that's all the way on the sleeve, and then crimp down hard at the 1/4 inch, approximately, right about there. There's one, nice crimp, and then the second one's going to go here. I think I'm in the right spot. Yep, crimp. Okay, so that sleeve is crimped on the wire nicely.
After crimping, if the tool was set up appropriately, you'll see the number 8 on the sleeves.
It doesn't matter which side you start on. We're just going to start with this one, and we're going to feed this in, making sure the key goes inside as well, like that. And then usually you can just let go of the cable. Now I'm going to set up my set screw, and using a 3/32 Allen key that's like on a screwdriver thing makes this job a lot easier. It doesn't come with a kit, but you can buy one at your hardware store. And you want to thread this in until the end is flush, like there, and then 3 turns in. 1 full turn, 2 full turns, and 3 full turns, and stop. We're going to go to the other end now. When you measure the tensioner, you can see that it's 1 1/4 inches. We're going to cut the cable to 1 inch, and that's going past the edge of the board. So at 1 inch, I'm going to use my chalk right above where the tensioner is and mark the beam. That way I can take my wire and I can pull it by hand. So I'm pulling on the cable, and then I'm going to mark it with my marker right where that chalk is, and that's 1 inch from the edge of the board. We're going to cut it there. You need a good pair of wire cutters to cut the cable well. This is stainless steel 1x19, and these are available from Sayrite, but you can also get good cable cutters at a hardware store. I'm going to put it right on my mark right there. Nice cut. Now we're going to insert the end of the cable into our tensioner, pull it taut with our hand as tight as we can, and then mark the cable again with our marker right in the flange of the tensioner and pull it out. So first I'm going to put the key on the cable and run it down. And then I'm going to put the sleeve on the cable, and then I'm going to take the key, put it on my mark, and move it 1 key's distance away from the mark, like right there. We're going to crimp this on with it at this distance. Now, do you have to be exactly accurate? No, but you want to be about there. I have a helper that's holding the cable, which makes this a lot easier. I'm just going to crimp it on there, and then I'm going to move it around. I'm going to get it in position without crimping it all the way. Yeah, that's a good position. Then I'm going to position this right where I want it, which is there, and I'm going to crimp. Okay, so now we have it exactly where we want it. It's a little bit further, but it's going to be fine. And you can see there's an 8 on the crimp as well on the sleeve. That means you've got the right settings on this. And then we're going to crimp it one more time, just like we did the other end. And this is how we're going to do all the cable runs to measure them to size. Just like that. Insert the cable and the sleeve in the key, and then use the nut and tighten it down. Should be pretty easy. If the cable runs into the wood on the other end, you can always take it out and trim it a little bit shorter, as long as you're trimming past the sleeve. Okay, once I get it fairly snug, I am going to, because I can't hardly do it with this tool, switch to a L Allen wrench. Now I'm using an Allen wrench with an L so I can get some torque on this, and I want this cable to be nice and tight, and you can tension both ends almost 3/4 of an inch, which should be plenty of the way we installed it. Sorry if my hands are getting in the way, but I'm going to tighten this down hard. The other set screw is already 3 turns in, but it can go much further. So I'm going to tighten this up a little bit, and I'll show you what kind of tension I'm looking for by pulling on the cable. So the cable is never going to be totally tight, but this is what I'm looking for. Something fairly tight like this. Well, the weight of it's always going to cause it to sag a little bit. That's normal. So you need to do this with all the runs.
If you selected the rope system, watch this chapter. It'll show you where to install the hardware. Here's a look ahead at the rope pulley system in operation. It uses blocks and pulleys to open and close the canopy. The line or rope will need to come down one of the pergola's posts, or it could be the building, and that is what we call the control line. Determine where you want it to come down and install the hardware for it as follows.
We mounted the cheek block about 4 foot up from the ground, and we just use these 2 screws to do so, and it mounts up like this. And then above that, by anywhere from 8 to 12 inches, mount this, what do you call this thing? Yeah, a cam cleat. And if you're not careful, it will come apart. Without the screws are what hold it together. So I've already mounted it at this position, and that needs to be done at the control line side. So I snapped the track up here, and there's where we marked it for the pulley open rope open close system, and there's the top of the track. But you can just use the track as a gauge, and you want to put this on about a half inch or so up from that location straight, okay? And you have to put this on before you put the block on. Make sure it's straight. Yep, it looks straight. And we're going to run the screw on the top one as well. We're going to do the exact same thing for the one on the opposite end. It'll be the same distance up from the track. The track is canted. So this goes on with the stainless steel screw through the top and down, and then the nylock nut goes underneath. I'm going to move the track out of the way so I don't have to contend with that. And I want to make sure this goes on tight, so I'm going to use a Phillips screwdriver above, and then this is a 9mm socket. Make sure it bites down well. You don't want this to move. Good. Same process for the other one. Yeah, the other one goes right there. We're going to do the exact same process for it. Nice. So the single block goes on the opposite end of the control line, and we want this, it has a strap eye, we want this to be just above the bar, so and above that hole for us. So I'm going to put it on right there, and these use a screw with a Phillips head. So I just need to get the drill from my aware helper.
Upon reflection, it would have been more effective if the single block pulley were positioned 1 inch lower than what is currently depicted. This adjustment would allow it to rest slightly on top of the flange of the awning track. However, once the line is installed, it will not pose any issues.
Making sure it's straight up and down. And we'll do the same thing on the opposite end, or side I should say, at the same position from the bar. So let me show you when we're done. So the block should hang just about there. It doesn't have to be exact.
Place it 1 inch lower for better performance.
This double block here is going to go up here about 1 inch up from here, but it needs to be directly below the post that holds the control line, which we already have some stuff attached to it. So you don't want it above this, you want it over here so the line can come past the end of the track. And about 1 inch up from here, which would put it right about there. That's about 1 inch. And I'm going to use this long stainless steel screw first and screw it in. And we want to go all the way to the block, but we don't want it so tight that it compresses the block too much. That's good. Now we're going to turn the block at 45 degrees. So this is up about 45 degrees. So this smaller screw keeps it from turning, and we'll just put it right here, screw it in, and don't go too tight with this because you don't want this to just clamp shut. So that's perfect, just like that. Lines should come straight down here.
If you use the Pulley open close system, then we're going to show you in this chapter how to feed the lines through the block and pulleys. This illustration may help in that task. It shows a completed and working canopy.
That's our control line, and so we want to come over to the first canopy's single block, which is this one. And you want to take your line and run it up through the back end, leave a tail of about 3 foot, doesn't have to be exact, and do an overhand knot so that this just secures the end of the line, and do it loosely. Okay, and then we're going to take the line, we're going to go all the way to the double block near the control line. Now we go through the top portion of the double block pulley and we pull all the line through. We want to go over any wire runs to the next block, and then we want to go through the top portion of this double pulley block, this is for the opposite end, and pull all the line through.
We advise feeding it through the bottom portion of this block, not the top.
Now for the single block on the opposite beam, we go through the bottom and out the top and run all the line through, and we go back to the double end block, or to the double pulley block on the opposite side, opposite end, I should say. Now at the double pulley, go through the underside of this pulley, go over the middle wire, and he's going to do that. Run the cable, or run the rope all the way through.
If you feed it through the top of the block now, the lines won't cross. So we recommend the top, not the bottom, obviously.
So we're not going to go through this double pulley, we're going to go over it, and we're going to go to this block that's at 45 degrees above the control line, go through one of the pulleys, I like to go through the one by the beam, then go to the cheek block below. So it should be like that. Doesn't matter if you go through here, if you go through there, but start at the bottom and then run the line through. We're going to go back up to the double block pulley that is at a 45 degree angle. Up from the cheek block, we go up through this double block pulley, the one that's left over, and we come over any cable runs, and we go through this pulley from the bottom coming out, and we actually run the line back to the single block pulley. So run it all the way through. I'm going to just tie this loose end to the strap eye so that I know this is the last line that we worked on, and that's just to secure it in place. And I'll make it a little bit loose so that I can do what I need to do next. Overhand knot. Like that, that's all it needs.
Clip the canopy to the wire and get a second help because this canopy is rather wide.
Okay, these are cable wire stops, and I removed the nut. And we want to put this on, and we're not going to tighten it down. We're just going to put one on each one of the cable runs loosely like this so that we can lock the last bar up against this side where it's going to be stored. This is the end that is going to be up against the beam that we're going to store it at, and I've got two helpers because this is so wide. We're going to clip it on. We want to push the stop up here so that this is all the way up against the beam, and I like to do it so that the screw's on the outside so I can undo it and then tighten this down. And we need to do this for all the cable runs. The middle ones, we only have one middle one. You may have more. I'm going to put it on so it's basically up and down like this so I can get the screw. 5mm Allen key. Okay, so now we have those in place. We're going to put the rest of the canopy up, making sure the webbing straps are sitting appropriately, like that. We have some slats in the line because we obviously didn't tie it super tight. So I'm going to basically cut this one here, because this one's going to have a knot on this side, with a hot knife. And this side, the other side's going to fall, which is quite okay. So let it fall. Make sure you cut the bottom one. Okay. And then this is going to go through this hole, and I'm going to tie just an overhand knot. And I won't do it super tight because I might have to do some adjustment. Maybe. Like that. And then the one that fell, we're going to grab, and we're going to go through this side with a knot on the back side. This is the one furthest from the control line, the end furthest from the control line. Let me get that. Okay, you can pull some excess out, put an overhand knot on this side. I'm not going to show that because obviously my hands are in the way. Now we need to push this so that they're all on top of each other, and they can't because that one is tied a little bit too tight. So I'm going to loosen that knot over there and push this all the way against this other beam. So this one's too tight, that's why I can't push it up against the canopy. I'm just going to untie it completely. This is the beginning one that we started with. And now let's push this all the way up so that it's flat against the beam, and it is. And this one is going to come out of here, and it's going to be put in from the top coming down, and we don't want to go through that loop like that. And let's just get this one out of the way. I'm going to let this one fall to the ground so I don't have to contend with it. So this is the last one we tied. Let's let it fall to the ground. See, it's behind the strap eye. Okay, this one goes through the back side. We want to pull out the slack and have this be up against the structure. Okay, and I'm going to tie a knot here. This is a preliminary knot, overhand knot. Don't cinch it down all the way yet. So the one on the ground I'm going to put through the hole, and I'm going to pull the tension out as much as I can and tie a knot on the back side, an overhand knot. And we can make adjustments to make sure that it's opening consistently after we do one final test. So what we want is, when it comes to the control line side, we want them to reach the block at the same rate approximately. And you can see this one's a little bit closer than that one. So all we have to do is adjust the knots until they basically pull consistently. Okay, we're happy with it. We're going to cut it off, and I like to leave about an inch tail or so, just so I can make final adjustments if I need to later on. And we're done.
Protect your family and friends from the sun with a wire-hung canopy for your pergola. Take a few measurements and check out the Say Right fabric calculator to see the materials that are required for your particular pergola. If you'd like to see a list of the tools that we used, they are listed on the fabric calculator. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe so you can be notified of new tutorial videos when they become available. We're trying to reach 500,000 subscribers, so your help is much appreciated. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Say Right, thanks for watching.